Welcome back. I hope you all had a great lunch and that you're feeling energized for this afternoon.
Because right now, we have two very influential people for our next Fireside chat. Join me in welcoming Mr. Eberhard, the Vice Director of Switzerland Tourism, along with Mr. Yap, the Deputy Chief Executive of the Singapore Tourism Board.
Aside from having an impressive career, Mr. Eberhard is also a TEDx speaker and a lover of trains. No wonder our train system here is so good. Mr. Yap was also awarded the Singapore Government Overseas Merit Scholarship and the Cambridge Commonwealth Trust Fund. Impressive. Don't forget to submit any questions you might have before the end of our Fireside chat. Mr. Eberhard, Mr. Yap, how are you doing today? And if I'm not mistaken, I see a train in the back of your Zoom background, Mr. Eberhard.
Absolutely. That's the Jungfrau train going up Mount Jungfrau.
Excellent. How are you both doing today?
Excellent.
Very good.
Excellent. Well, the floor is yours. I'm so excited to hear what you both have to say today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yap, how was the COVID influencing your Singaporean tourism in the last 2 years? Can you tell us a little bit about the situation then and now?
Yeah, thanks very much, Us, for asking that question. I think for many of us who have been in the tourism sector for many years, this has been by far the most challenging period. I would even call it posing some kind of an existential risk for the entire tourism sector because of the widespread effect COVID-19 had created on the entire sector. And I think for Singapore, we are a small island state, small country. Prior to COVID-19, we were able to kind of ride the secular growth trends of the tourism sector because it was growing very healthily, driven by the advent of low-cost carriers that provided a lot of people with accessibility to satisfy their wanderlust. So we were growing at a fairly rapid pace in the early part of this century. And in 2019, we actually managed to record a very high, there was a record level of 19.1 million international visitors to this very small nation of about 5.5 million, now maybe 6 million people. But COVID-19 just totally disrupted the entire landscape. When it first occurred in 2019, and the numbers that we saw, the international visitor arrival numbers that we saw in 2019, it was in 2020, it was only about 12% of our 2019 numbers.
Wow.
And in 2021, it got a bit worse. It was only about 1.7%. So can you imagine how much of the tourism sector has been decimated by the COVID-19 challenges? It was very, very tough for many of us, including the Singapore Tourism Board, who is the champion tourism sector for our industry. But it is just as hard for many of our industry stakeholders and partners, whether you're from the hospitality industry, relying on foreign visitors to fill up your room occupancy, or whether you're an attractions operator. You know, we used to enjoy many visitors coming from overseas to experience the different attractions that we have, the different retail dining experiences that we have. All this literally came to a sudden halt back in 2019. So the effect, I would say, was unprecedented. The crisis was acutely felt across the entire sector. No one was spared. Who's over to you? What's the situation in Switzerland? Was it just as bad, or you guys were able to cope better because you have got a huge domestic market hinterland where domestic tourism, I'm sure it still accounts for a significant proportion of your tourism.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm an old guy, and I had experienced quite some crises along my career, with an oil crisis, a financial crisis, also some pandemic crises before, like SARS and that. But also, as with you, we never had a crisis like we had with COVID. And I remember when we had the first signs from China that there is something coming up, we started to create a task force. So we had a task force here in Zurich in Switzerland, and we said, oh yes, that will last probably about 2 months. And then, it's a wave that will rise, and then it will fall down, and then it will be over after 2 months. And so there were many 2 months until it got better. It's like all over the world, we have been suffering for the last 2 years. Not as bad as you have, and you put it rightly. We have a very strong domestic ground that helps us to offset the loss of foreign travelers. We have roughly in the good times, 2019, we had about 45% domestic visitors, and those domestic visitors, they saved us a little bit, but we lost also in 2020. Compared to 2019, we did lose about 40%. And also the Swiss themselves, they actually lost compared to 2019. Then we had the fortune that we had the ski resorts open in Europe last winter. So the winter 2021, we had all our ski resorts remained open as the only one in Europe. We had a very liberal way of dealing with the crisis. And that helped us also to welcome some visitors from Poland, as example. Poland, a market that was a small market up to then, was all of a sudden the most important foreign winter market for our country. And Poland, besides now of Switzerland, is the only market that has better figures now at the end of 21 than at the end of 2019. So Switzerland and Poland, they were positive, but the whole rest also at the end of 2021, we are still lacking roughly 20% compared to 2019. We're also a small population. We have about 8 million people living in Switzerland compared to your 6 million. But tourism is perhaps not as important as in other countries. It's the 5th largest export industry in Switzerland. We have about 260,000 jobs that are created thanks to the tourism industry. And those jobs obviously were pretty much in jeopardy over the last 2 years. Obviously, hospitality industry as such, restaurants had to close, hotels had no more international guests. And we've seen, especially in the cities like Zurich or Basel or Geneva, that the business travel was missing. So business travel was missing, and also the foreign travelers that are staying much more in our cities than the Europeans or the Swiss guests that stay more in the mountainside resorts. So in that respect, we have been pretty much hit as well. May I ask you, Jaap? I mean, we are both representatives of national tourist offices, and national tourist offices obviously have the role to promote the destination and make sure that it is well known around the world. Did you do something special to offset the effects of the crisis?
Yes, we certainly did. But as a tourism organization, we literally had to reinvent ourselves. And maybe I can explain why. So just like in Switzerland, tourism sector used to account for close to 4% of Singapore's GDP and hundreds of thousands of jobs. So it is quite a critical pillar for the industry. And when this happened, I think many of our stakeholders suddenly face the business and the financial crisis of a lifetime. The cash flows were extremely tight. Revenues were drying up because we were so reliant on foreign visitors. So as a result, many of the companies actually had to take the very tough decisions of right-sizing the organization. So we did see quite a significant drop in the number of employees in the sector. I think the first mode which the Singapore government did together, we had to make sure that we are able to support our industry through this crisis. We don't know how long the winter of COVID-19 is going to last, but we know that the capabilities and the know-how that we have built through the entire tourism sector rests with the companies, with all these industries, with their people and the talent. And I think years that we have painstakingly taken to build in terms of those expertise, those market knowledge, networks and know-how can be easily lost if you're not very, very careful. Because companies, if they close shop or they retrench their people, the talent will flow out to other industry. So we were very cognizant of that threat through the tourism agenda. So we worked very, very closely with government to provide very strong financial support to our industry. So the Singapore government, thankfully, has always been fiscally very disciplined, and I'm sure the Switzerland government, likewise, AAA rated, one of the few countries left in the world that's AAA rated in terms of its credit rating. The government had to plow into its past reserves in order to lend very strong fiscal support to the industry. So for the sectors that were very badly hit, the tourism sector is one of them, they were given very strong wage support. So the government literally said for every employee in your payroll, X% of the wages, the government would foot it. So this in a large extent reduces the wage burden that industries and companies had to experience. So thereby it shielded them from the worst effect of the pandemic, and they were able to at least hold on to the staff until such times where the tourism sector reopens more meaningfully, which is something that Singapore government together with our tourism board has been working very hard to do. But other levers that we have used includes reducing the business costs for the tourism sector players, such as waiving the license fees that they have to pay and so on and so forth. This is something that we did as well. But at the same time, the government also availed to our industry stakeholders a very meaningful grant resources. We call them grant. Basically, it's just a pot of money. If they have good ideas to transform the business, if they have good ideas to introduce new compelling experiences that keep themselves relevant to visitors, then these are initiatives and efforts that we want to encourage. And so the government leaned forward very, very much in order to provide support to our industry players so that they have a means to still make a commercially viable living out of this crisis. And of course, the other major factor, which I'm quite sure, I like to hear your views, is how does the Swiss government also take steps to reopen its borders, reopen its economy? Today, for Singapore, I would say that we have not reached the stage where we are very open. In fact, the government today just announced that they will be vaccinated. When we are vaccinated anywhere else in the world, you are able to come into Singapore or quarantine free. So that's a very big step. In the past, we did it in a more calibrated manner, focusing on the countries where you come from and having different kind of requirements when you come in from those countries. But step by step, progressively, we are beginning to open up the entire economy, the entire borders, and we are ready to welcome international visitors to come into Singapore again. So I wouldn't say that we have reached we are able to get back to the pre-pandemic numbers anytime soon. I will be very, very honest with you. I think COVID-19 is going to take some years for Singapore to recover from it. Our sensing it's going to be 3 maybe 3 to 5 years before our numbers normalize to the 2019 levels. And of course, different cities, different destinations will have varying degrees of adjustment, and the recovery will be uneven. But at least I can say that we are able to see the light at the end of the tunnel right now.
Yeah.
And our stakeholders have got that sense of optimism, and hand in hand working closely with the tourism body like STB. I think we will be able to get through this crisis and emerge stronger from it. Happy to hear your views as well, Urs, on this aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we are experts in tunnels. Switzerland has so many tunnels. So we see the light at the end of many, many tunnels in our country. And perhaps I also take up one of the questions that came in to answer also this question, you know, what kind of challenges have you come across when making decisions in your own roles, and how did you manage to overcome those challenges? One of the really the toughest challenge that I personally found, and also obviously my colleagues in the management, the absolute chaos of restrictions and regulations worldwide. So no country had the same restrictions and regulations than the other one. Even in Europe, you know, even Europe as being a continent, and with the European Union, each country had their own rules, their own regulations. You know, in some country, even on a regional basis, you had restrictions and regulations. And for us, it was incredibly difficult to keep up with those ever-changing restrictions. And I can imagine also for a traveler, it was extremely difficult to make a decision, because you didn't know, can I travel back? Do I have to go into quarantine? Is it safe to travel? And so we developed a system for our sector here in Switzerland, where we tried to keep really up to speed what's going to happen, what is happening. And so we had some contacts into the authorities of our country, but also in the authorities of countries that are our source markets. And we had a list, and still have that list, where we do every day, we check, you know, what has a tourist from Singapore to do to come to Switzerland? What does this tourist have to do to return back to the home market? So we have this, you know, entry regulations for Switzerland, and we know them very well, but we had to really inquire about the entry regulations in other markets. And so this was a service that we were lending to our sector that was really helpful also. Even today, you know, it's now in Switzerland, it's 270 days after the last vaccination. In other countries, it's a whole year after the last vaccination. Some vaccinations are still not accepted, like Sputnik is not accepted. Sinopharm and Sinovac are accepted. So it's a bit of a chaos. So that was one of the challenge. The other challenge was to find out the tipping point. When are people ready to think about travel again? When do they start to start dreaming about the booking? And we had a three-step approach to that. We had a so-called empathy phase, where we basically said people, obviously same as you could say, the beauty of Switzerland has not changed at all during the pandemic. So it is still the same beautiful country. And so we said, dream now, travel later. So we did this empathy campaign, telling people dream about our country. So we showed them beautiful pictures. We very relaxing pictures as well, and say, hey, dream. The time will come that you can travel again. Then we had a second phase. Once we've seen that people were ready to not just dream, but to start planning again, we had the so-called awareness phase. And in this awareness phase, we were using all digital and physical means to keep Switzerland top of mind of potential visitors. So we had a great ambassador with Roger Federer. We did a TV spot with Federer and Robert De Niro. We had at Times Square, Shibuya Square in Tokyo, Piccadilly in London. We had huge out-of-home campaigns, just making people aware, hey, Switzerland still exists, it's still here. And then we had a third phase, which we called the performance phase. When the tipping point was reached, and we knew on the 26th of June, 2021, we knew that the borders will open again for Americans, for people from the Gulf countries. So we used offer-based marketing to get people not just dream and plan, but also to book. And we have seen a very immediate take up. In July, on a sudden, we had again American tourists. We had a lot of people from Arabic countries in our country. So this dream plan go approach, so dreaming, planning, and then really buying, has been working very well in our situation. So in that respect, we are pretty happy how it worked out, and hopefully now the situation, as you say, will improve. We are a bit more optimistic than you are, Jaap. We think that, or we thought, I have to correct myself, before the war starting in Eastern Europe, we were very positive that by 2023, Europe will be back on the levels of 2019. The domestic market had anyway already a record year in 2021, so there we were already. And the long haul markets like Asia, America will take a bit longer. Americas, we estimated 23, 24, Asia 24, 25. But now with the war in the eastern part of Europe, our optimism is a bit damped.
Yeah, thank you for sharing about your thinking and your approach. How you see the tourism numbers coming back to Switzerland. I think you have done a number of things which resonated with me, because I think we are also addressing that kind of challenge. I think first and foremost, COVID-19, because of the nature of this pandemic, it was at the onset of this, no one knew what sort of a creature this was. And there were tremendous public health consideration and concerns about whether you can still allow people to travel, move around freely like before, and what sort of impact, if you were to allow that, would that create in terms of your local transmission rate. I think for Singapore, we have taken a quite a conservative approach in the beginning, and we literally had to kind of take a stop on some of the activities. Our borders, in that sense, were also closed because I think the government needed some time to assess what are the risk factors involved and how do we deal with the risk, so that from a public health standpoint, the risk is still manageable. But even as we charted out the strategy of how do we then get ourselves to a situation where we will be a lot more comfortable with COVID, we have testing, we have contact tracing, and of course, later on, there's vaccine and so on. So all these are part of the suite of instruments that we had to use. But one key thing, as I mentioned earlier, is that our stakeholders are suffering because the business volume had literally dried up. So we had to make a very big shift in terms of the challenges. In the past, Singapore Tourism Board has been very focused on promoting international visitors to come and visit Singapore. We have not really paid any attention to the domestic audience. Yes, it is not a very big population, but in times like this, we got to really be able to be very nimble, agile, and change tack very, very quickly. And so that's what we did. When international travel was still quite limited, because other countries are also not comfortable in letting their citizens and residents get out. So we had to repivot our tourism promotion and development and marketing plans. So we went to focus very much on the local domestic visitors, and we came out with not just with campaigns for local residents to rediscover Singapore, because I think most of us in Singapore, we take for granted that we are here, but actually there are many things, many interesting experiences at the back corner where you stay, where we may not be aware of. So we went in on a big marketing campaign to entice Singaporeans to discover the hidden gems in their neighborhood. And the government also came up with some substantial funding. We call it the Singapore Rediscover vouchers. Every citizen above 18 years old is given 100 Singapore dollars. 100, not a lot, but cumulatively, it amounts to 300 to 400 million in Singapore dollars. So these vouchers can be used by citizens to spend on hotels. If they want to do a staycation, they can use a voucher to spend on attractions and to spend on tours. I think these are the key pillars of the tourism sector. And because of the Singapore Rediscover vouchers, I think during this period where foreign visitorship is not coming, they still have a means to earn their keeps and to keep their operations and to keep their talent and their capability. So that's one big thing that we pivot into. And of course, Us, you mentioned about, the myriad of rules and regulations, and sometimes it can be very confusing and difficult to navigate for visitors. So nowadays, uppermost in the mind of traveler is to see how safe is this destination, right? Are there many of these COVID-19 cases? How safe is it for me to bring my family to visit? So that's one question uppermost in their mind. And secondly is, what are some of the requirements? Do I need to take a departure test to clear myself of COVID? And when I enter into the destination, what are some of the other rules that I need to follow? We know that these can be extremely difficult for visitors to navigate. So like Switzerland, what we have done is to put all this information together in a visitor-friendly way and have it easily accessible through all the different channels that we have, whether it's the website of Singapore Tourism Board, we call it Visit Singapore, or the app, Visit Singapore app. Any visitor who download this is able to get all the necessary information that they need on the regulatory requirements of COVID in Singapore. So that's something that we did to basically address the hygiene factor that international tourists will have of a destination. But beyond that, I think there was a very good question. What are some of the key strategies, innovative strategies that we need to use? Because I am sure many destinations, whether it's Switzerland, whether it's Singapore, and many of the other competitor destinations, they're all thinking of ways and means to woo back the customers. And I think we got to find some way to distinguish ourselves as a destination, to cut above the noise and the clutter, and to distinguish ourselves through unique experiences, through vibrant event calendars, through things that visitors cannot get themselves into anywhere else in the world. So I think we got to do some of this. We got to, even in difficult times like this, we got to continue to build our pipeline of vibrant, exciting new experiences. And that's an area that we have been investing in. So new attractions will come up from time to time, and we support some of these developments through the adoption of immersive technologies, through the use of augmented reality, virtual reality concepts, and so on. At the same time, we work very, very hard in securing both leisure as well as the business events into Singapore. I think many of you would have heard about the extension of our F1, the Formula One race in Singapore for another 7 years. Many people are very excited when we announced the decision to extend the race in Singapore Formula One for another 7 years. That speaks to a lot of pent-up demand from the markets. People want to travel again. People want to be able to experience some of these lifestyle experiences that were so precious to them pre-pandemic, and they are raring to go. So I think we need to be out there maintaining not just a very, very vibrant event calendar, but maintaining our mind share in those destinations. So we invest a lot in marketing efforts with our different partners in different markets, so that continually we get them to be excited about Singapore. We show them what's happening in Singapore, and we want to drive anticipation for travel to Singapore when the borders are more reopened and people are comfortable to travel again. So I think these are the few key strategies that we have put in place in order for us to emerge stronger from this crisis.
Yeah, in terms of Switzerland, we also defined a few key strategies looking forward, and we also looked at some of the travel trends that you can see nowadays. Certainly, the whole digital aspect is a very important one. So digitization of offers, making stuff available on digital platforms. It's a very important task, and we have in the last 2 years invested a lot in that respect. But it's also one of the trends, mega trends that we see as sustainability. So sustainability is very dear to us. Switzerland has sustainability very much in the DNA, like Singapore. We have clean energy. We make sure that the carbon footprint is as neutral as possible when you travel through Switzerland. We have a public transportation system that is second to none. It's like a big hop on, hop off system, but for a whole country. And it's all actually with water power, so hydropower. So it's really very, very green to travel around. So Swiss sustainability is an important factor. We call it Swiss-tainable, not sustainable. We call it Swiss-tainable. So it's the sustainability the Swiss way. It's also a lot of human-powered mobility, so hiking, biking, getting to know our beautiful nature on by foot, walking or biking. Another very important aspect is that we see that we want to make people stay longer in our country. So also not having masses of people coming, but those that are coming, that they stay longer, that they spend more time, so that we find a balance between a geographical area, so that people are traveling throughout the country, not just the hotspots, but visiting more of the country, having a seasonal diversity, so that people travel in the spring, the summer, the fall, and the winter, and have also a market diversity, having people from different markets visiting Switzerland. Indians are coming in April, May, June. Other markets, like European markets, they do come in the summer. Some markets are stronger in the winter. So by focusing on different source markets, we are also trying to balance the incoming tourism stream into our country. So that's some of the key strategies. I have seen here also a very interesting question that perhaps we can also talk about a bit, is how does the pandemic affect the tourism in terms of workforce and cutting on staff numbers? Do employers prefer to hire more experienced employees rather than unexperienced, such as freshly graduated students? Obviously, a question very close to the heart of the audience. So, Jaap, do you hire more experienced employees, or do you give unexperienced, in praxis, unexperienced scholars also a chance?
I think there is certainly room for both, if you ask me. I think whilst the pandemic has created some short-term negative impact on the tourism industry and also the workforce, the talent and employees in the industry, but I think if you look ahead, whilst Singapore is not as bullish as Switzerland in terms of expecting the numbers to get back to pre-pandemic level so quickly, but we are not that far off, to be very honest. And more importantly, the medium to long-term prospects of the tourism sector remain very rosy from our perspective. So we are very, very confident that the innate nature of human beings in wanting to connect with one another, in wanting to be able to experience different cultures, different destinations, and to be able to interact with those destinations, the wanderlust that is innate in each and every one of us will not be easily extinguished, COVID or otherwise. So I think after some years where they are used to the normalization of travel in a COVID-19 situation, I think gradually the numbers will come back and the growth trajectory will resume very strongly thereafter. So we are fundamentally very optimistic about the mid to longer term prospects of the tourism sector. Secondly, I think it's no longer a question of doing the same old, the business as usual mode. I think Us highlighted some of these new considerations about sustainability and so on. And I think he is absolutely right. We got to think about how has COVID-19 not just impeded travel sentiments in the immediate term, but how will the pattern of travel, the preferences and needs of the travelers in a post-COVID-19 world look like? I think that's something in Singapore we study very, very closely. And I think there are a few key observations that we kind of glean from our study. Firstly, I think in the post-COVID world, visitors are going to be a lot more focused on the safety of a destination. So therefore, I think each destination will have to do our part and to give the assurance to the travelers when they come, either on their own, with their family or with their friends, they are not just able to enjoy a good time in the destination, but to do so safely. So I think that's one aspect where it is quite critical. So in that regard, I think, because of COVID, sometimes the transmission can be spread, through touching of surfaces and so on. So how do we integrate technology such as contactless registration in our hotel check-in, in our clearance of the customs, or even if you're a MICE business traveler, you're coming for a MICE event, how do you do some of this in a seamless manner, but at the same time, through the use of technology, you are able to do so in a safe way as well. So that's something that is quite important, I feel, in the post-COVID-19 world. How do you give convenience to travelers? And how do you, I think the era of mass leisure travel will take some time to come back. When people come in large groups, I think it will probably be one of the last few segments to recover. But what we see, at least from STB, Singapore Tourism Board's point of view, is that there are many free and independent travelers who will still be willing to come to experience a destination, but they want to be able to do so not just safely, not just conveniently, but also in a highly personalizable manner. So I think we've got to think a lot harder, working with the industry players, how do we create experiences that we know they want in Singapore, that they want to experience? How do we make this more discoverable to them? So these are some basic attributes that I said would stand the destination very, very well going forward. But I want to touch on what Wu said about sustainability. In fact, I think he's very right. I think what we saw is in times like this, many people, they are cooped up in their own country, in their own home, work from home. This has gotten quite normal in that sense. So we saw that there is growing interest in wellness. How do people, still work, live, and play and maintain that balance in terms of their physical well-being, their emotional well-being, and their lifestyle well-being? So the concept of wellness, it's gaining currency, is becoming a very important factor that travelers look out for in a destination today. The other key one is really sustainability. And I think a lot of travelers today, they want to do something for the environment. They want to do something for Mother Earth. And we need to then be able to shape some of these tourism-related developments in a sustainable manner, first and foremost. And secondly, we need to create opportunities for them to engage the destination through the sustainability kind of features as well. So these are some things that we are thinking through very, very hard in Singapore. How do we stand out in terms of our cliches for both sustainability and wellness to our international audience? And I believe that if we make use of this very difficult period to keep investing in new capabilities, not the same old, but in new areas of growing importance, and we are taking very big bets in the themes of sustainability and wellness, I believe if we can work very closely with the industry and execute this well, then I'm very, very confident that we will recover even faster than what I had earlier expected. And there will be many job opportunities and good jobs for aspiring students like yourself thinking of a career in the hospitality industry, in the tourism sector. It's not dead. It will come back again very strongly, but we need to hit all the right notes and execute well.
Yeah, here in Switzerland, it's slightly different. We have a huge shortage of talent in the hospitality industry currently. I know of hotels, they could sell much more rooms, but they do not have the staff. They don't have enough chefs to have all the restaurants open. They do not have staff to keep all the rooms open. So there is a shortage of talents in the hospitality industry in Switzerland. When the crisis hit early 2020, a lot of the talent left the tourism industry, found other job opportunities, and they do not return. So there is a lot of opportunity, and I'm sure you confirmed that, yeah. There is no more beautiful job than working in the tourism industry. It's the best job in the world, having the ability to put a smile on the face of your guests, to have the opportunity to have this immediate feedback of happy travelers. It's the most beautiful thing that you can have. So tourism industry is top.
I fully agree with you. This is an industry that requires passion and belief. And I think we are in a very serious business of creating fun and wonderful memories for many people, for visitors and so on. So I think it is very meaningful in that sense. I think it's up to each and every one of us in the tourism sector itself to roll up our sleeves and to figure out how do we get there, even when the tourism landscape may have been fundamentally changed because of COVID-19.
But it remains, it remains a people's business. It remains, you have to like people. If you work in the hospitality industry, you have to love people. You have to show emotions, and you have to accept emotions. It's an emotional business transaction. It's not a financial transaction. It's an experience. And when I was starting to study marketing many years ago, when there was no digital side effects, it was always, the unhappy visitor, a happy guest is the best marketing. That's what I learned 40 years ago. So if you make someone happy and they go back and tell everyone what a good time they had, and they will return, but also their friends and family will return because they are ambassadors for a great experience they had. There was one question we have, I think, 1 minute to go or 2 minutes to go. The high price point of Singapore and Switzerland. And to be honest, I'm quite happy that we have a high price point. We are a premium destination. We want to offer the best possible quality, and quality has a price. And I'd rather offer a good quality and make people happy than having just, masses of tourists for almost no income. It doesn't help anyone. So that's my stance. And yours, Yap?
I fully agree with you. I think we are what we are. We are, generally speaking, we are an advanced economy. And so it is inevitable that our price points will be high because our costs structure is high, our wage structure is high. So there's no running away from it. But it also means that we need to create value. We need to work harder at creating value for our customers, for the visitors. If we are able to curate events, we are able to curate experiences that they cannot easily find anywhere else in the world. It has got to be in Switzerland. It has got to be in Singapore. Guess what? People will be willing to pay for it because these are priceless experiences that they cannot find anywhere. And I think I go back to Uz, right? We are in the business of creating happy memories and fun. So when it comes to that, I think people are willing to pay if they can get the right kind of experiences and the right kind of memories of the destination.
Beautiful final word, Jaap. I could not have said it better. I think we're over 45 minutes. Thank you so very much for sharing your experiences. It was wonderful getting to know you, seeing you with this beautiful background of Singapore, and hope to see you once in person in Switzerland.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. It's been so fun exchanging views with you, Uz. I wish you all the best, and I wish all the best for Switzerland tourism as well. I hope we will recover faster than any of us. Thank you.
Mr. Eberhard, Mr. Jaap, thank you so much for that fireside. Both of your energies are palpable, and honestly, I cannot wait to explore Singapore for the first time and explore Switzerland even more. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eberhard,
you.
Mr. Jaap. Hearing about the similarities between Switzerland and Singapore was really interesting for me. Honestly, it hasn't always occurred to me that they had so many similarities, but I thought that was really wonderful. Thank you so much. But now it's time for a break. Have some tea, have some coffee, water, or simply relax. We will be back in 30 minutes with the first panel of the day. Thank you so much, gentlemen.